Good morning, everyone. My name is Connor Moran. I am the director of the Wisconsin Book Festival. It is my pleasure to welcome you this morning to the final event of our 2021 fall celebration featuring Mary Roach for her new book, Fuzz. We are also joined today by Joshua Foer, author of Moonwalking with Einstein. He will be our moderator today. I would normally say a lot more, but I'm just going to say thank you to Madison Public Library, Madison Public Library Foundation, and all of our sponsors for bringing free cultural events like this to us in all of our homes. I'm going to disappear, and Josh, please take it away.
Thanks so much, Connor, and thank you, Mary, for joining us on a Sunday morning. And because I was on the phone with you, I happened to know that you were being chased by a wild bear, which explains why you were 15 minutes late to this. And I'm
Actually,
hoping
three of them.
Okay, well, I'm hoping that you can now finally settle for all of us as like a public service announcement what the right thing to do is when you encounter a bear.
First of all, I want to apologize for my tardy arrival. It's I have no excuse other than I forgot that I have something at Sunday morning at 9 a.m. So I'm sorry. Thank you all for waiting for me. Okay, yes. So the right thing to do, well, I used to hear if it's brown, lie down. If it's black, fight back. And I was told that's really not a great piece of advice because frequently black bears, the species, appeared to be brown, and brown bears and grizzlies, sometimes grizzlies are brown bears, they may appear black. So that, in order to really tell the difference, you kind of have to measure the claws. And I think if you're in a position to measure the claws of a bear coming at you, it's probably not the best, it's not going to be helpful for you at that point. So the most important thing would be to determine, is this a defensive attack or a rare predatory attack where this animal actually wants to do me harm? The vast majority of the time, you startled them and they want you to back off. They want you, so they're going to appear really scary. They're going to be a bluff charge, with the ears up, and it's very effective. It is scary, I'm sure. And your job in that case is just to not be threatening, to back slowly away, talk calmly. If, however, it's more than a bluff charge and this animal is really intent on doing you some harm, then you fight back for sure. Yeah, anything you can. Hit the face, go for because it's lightly furred. So that would be, bear spray, if you have it. Now's the time to use it.
So let's back up for a step. For those who have not read the book yet, why it is that you are now an expert in how to handle an encounter with a wild bear, among many, many other creatures that one might encounter in a troubling context. So do you want to give us like a little introduction to this book,
Sure.
This wonderful book, Fuzz?
Oh, thank you for that, Josh. This is a book that's, the subtitle is When Nature Breaks the Law. And obviously I'm having a little fun there because these laws are written for humans. They are not written for animals. Animals follow their instincts. They don't follow our laws, nor should they be expected to. Nonetheless, they seem to break all of them, from manslaughter and home invasion and breaking and entering, all the way down the line to jaywalking and vandalism and trespassing and littering. So the book is kind of structured crime by crime, with the felonies in the first half and your misdemeanors in the second half. And for me, it was just a more approachable way to describe the book than saying this is a book about human wildlife conflict, which in essence it is. But human wildlife conflict is a term you see in textbooks, of which there are quite a few. So I just sort of repackaged it a little bit. I don't mean to imply that animals, in fact, are criminals. They do these things that if we did them, they'd be crimes.
How did you land on this as a subject for a book? Like, what I would love to, as a writer, I'm interested, but I bet as a reader, everybody here is also interested, and I'm sure more than a few writers as well. Like, what was the process? How did you end up deciding that this was going to be something you were going to spend your time on? And then What was the process from deciding that to figuring out
Yeah.
like what stories you were going to tell here?
I'm often asked like, well, what was the inspiration for your book? And I rarely have moments. I wish I did have moments of inspiration, where I could describe that feeling where the light bulb went off. It's more likely for me, it's more a process of just sort of stumbling blind, running into walls, and then finally just sitting down on something going, yeah, I think this is it. It's not. So I'll try to, it's kind of a meandering story, but I initially had gotten interested in some of the forensics work that's done at the National Wildlife Forensics Library that's National Wildlife Service runs up in Ashland, Oregon. There was a woman there who I came across a paper, and I don't even remember why. That would be good to know because it's kind of odd. It's a paper on how to distinguish real versus counterfeit tiger penis, and it's a guide that wildlife enforcement professionals use when contraband material is confiscated that appears to be an endangered species. This woman, Bonnie Yates.
Time out. We have to pause on that. We
Okay.
need the Zoom footnote on why somebody would be manufacturing a counterfeit tiger penis.
Okay, because tiger penis is a traditional. In some Asian countries, it is sometimes used as a traditional medicine for virility, erectile dysfunction. The tiger is a symbol of power, so all of its body parts are considered to confer power if you consume. Not all of them, but the penis is sometimes made into a soup, consumed that way, sold as that. Of course, it's illegal and it is not effective except as maybe a placebo. And so it's up to this this woman the samples are sent to her and she looks at them and makes a determination. It's actually very easy to tell. I can tell if you have any tiger penis that you're not sure it's real or not, you send it to me and I'll tell you, because it's almost always, happily for the tigers, it's almost always not tiger, it's horse or cow or deer, often, for two reasons. One, those are easier to obtain, and two, they're a lot bigger. The tiger has a very, very small penis for a tiger, for some animal with a very kind of potent and virile reputation. So it's a matter of having to, they have to carve barbs into the deer or horse penis to make it appear to be a felid cat penis. And I had imagined a sweatshop in Asia where people were, bent over with a bare light bulb, carving the little barbs into the deer penis. And then there'd be the sting operation where people would come in and from, Fish and Wildlife and arrest them. And unfortunately, if it's an open investigation, legally, I wouldn't be able to tag along. And so for me, that kind of ruined it. I mean, and this was just this was the way I'm just blabbing here.
By the way, are we still live on Facebook? Because we may have just been censored. I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know who's out there. I feel sorry for them. First I'm late and then I go on and on about tiger penis. But anyway, what was I saying about it? I have no idea where I was going. But
we were talking about the origins of this book.
The origins. Okay. So yeah, the way I don't think of a book idea ever. What I have is 2 chunks or 3 chunks that are sort of related. And I think, oh, these are really interesting and related things. What might be the book that you would build around that? What book would these fit into? And so that is kind of how I come up with them. But in this case, because I couldn't go anywhere, I couldn't focus on the investigator, be with them on the sting operation to crack the counterfeit tiger penis maker's ring. I couldn't do what I like to do. So I backed off, and at some point there came across this book it's a 1906 book called The Criminal Prosecution and Capital Punishment of Animals, which is a bizarre book. It's quite lengthy and dense. And for in the centuries, from 1500s to 1700s, it was pretty common to actually apply human laws to animals and punishments. Animals were executed for, there's a, famous bears, pigs, there's trials where animals were put on trial, had legal representation, and were usually they ended up being punished. There weren't a whole lot of them released. But that kind of made me turn the story inside out. In other words, instead of wildlife being the victim and the contraband people being the criminals, in this case, that just looking at animals as entities that commit crimes. And fast forward to today, we've sort of figured out that preventing these things is far more a far better approach, and certainly more fair to the animals, who are just being animals after all. So that's kind of how it came about.
So in the process of reporting this book, you spent a lot of time with a lot of criminal animals, or people who are in the business of preventing or punishing criminal animals, most of which we're talking about are like animals we all sort of know and love, or know and hate. And I'm curious if there are any creatures that you encountered through this work that where your impression of them totally flipped, or either something that we don't like became endearing, or something that we sort of have positive feelings about you just came to really despise.
Yeah, I had the experience that comes to mind is I spent some time in New Zealand, where New Zealand has a program called Predator Free 2050. And what they're trying to do is exterminate the 3 invasive species that cause the biggest dent in the populations of their own animals. New Zealand, it's an island nation, developed these birds, flightless birds, evolved they don't have land predators naturally. I mean, they didn't for eons, so they're very vulnerable. So now when you introduce creatures that like to eat birds and their eggs, they have no way to get away. So these animals were introduced, stoats and ferrets and possums were brought in for a fur trade. Anyway, these animals have been decimating the populations there of these amazing and unique creatures. So when I first arrived there, I was at the Otago Peninsula, and I spent some time out at this place where you can see this beautiful creature called the yellow-eyed penguin, and just a gorgeous, bizarre-looking bird with these yellow flashes coming back from its eyes, and it kind of looks like it's wearing pink go-go boots, and it's just an extraordinary bird. And there's only a few thousand left for various reasons, one of them being stoats and feral cats, but that's sort of another issue. But anyway, the stoats get blamed a lot. There's a lot of anti-stoat propaganda and anti-possum propaganda, because both of these creatures contribute to the demise of all these native species. So the stoats and the possums, when you spend time looking at this wildlife that is being destroyed, it's easy to sort of absorb all the propaganda. You go to a gift shop and you'll see a taxidermied stoat, with its little needly teeth bared, on top of a bird going, ah. The gift shops sell squashed possum chocolates. There is this just massive anti-stoat, anti-possum propaganda, because the country is trying to trap and poison these out of existence, these creatures. And it's easy to fall into that, stoats, they're killing off the beautiful yellow-eyed penguin. So my initial experience was just, that propaganda and the yellow-eyed penguins, that visit. And then I spent time with this guy, Bruce Warburton, who works for Land Care Research, which is government funded or government owned. Anyway, what he's trying to do is, because the country's decided to wipe out these creatures, he's trying to make sure it's done humanely. So he's testing better traps, designing better traps that are more instantaneous, the head is positioned for a direct hit. It's kind of an ugly business. But while I was there talking to him about this project, he's testing some poisons that are more humane, because what they're using are not. I mean, poisons are rough. It's a slow, unpleasant way to go, depending on the poison. so they were, and so then I spent time with these, these possums and stoats that were there that are, they're just kind of adorable in their own right. And you just feel really, they're like, okay, here are these possums are being fed this, it's cholecalciferol, it's a form of vitamin D. And we thought that it would be more humane, but they stop eating. And it's just, you're looking at these guys going, oh man, I feel bad for these guys, so I, in the course of 2 days, just went from, kill them, kill them, give the birds a chance, because I'm a birder and I love birds, to just looking at these poor creatures. And it was through no fault of their own that they are in New Zealand. The possums were brought in to establish a fur trade. The stoats were brought in because someone else earlier had brought in rabbits from Europe because they wanted the land to look more like home. They're called acclimatization societies. And the rabbits, of course, with no predators, took off, overpopulated. So somebody had the bright idea, let's import stoats and ferrets from Europe. So they did. And of course, the stoats and ferrets looked around, saw the rabbits and thought, okay, rabbits, but these eggs and these little chicks and birds, that seems easier and more tasty. So then the tragedy began to unfold. But that is a very long-winded answer to your question. But yeah, it's very hard to feel comfortable about eliminating that many of these creatures. And the stoat is it's a fierce fighter. It'll take on creatures bigger than itself. I'm told that although this isn't necessarily endearing, the male stoat impregnates its own young in the nest before they leave the nest, and there's sort of a delayed implantation. And the researcher was like, that's pretty awesome, right? I'm like, I suppose so. But anyway, the stoat is a unique creature. And anyway, they're, they don't deserve to die, but I understand why it's being done. Anyway, that was the flip-flop. That was the main flip-flop.
I gotta say, your chapter on elephants had the reverse effect on me. Like, I came away like, elephants which I thought were these like wonderful, adorable, they've got great memories. They're brutes. They're like terrible brutes and murderers. And I wonder if you could just give us a little color on what terrible animals elephants are now.
No, they're not. They're not brutes. Okay, here's the situation with elephants. But yeah, like you, Josh, I was kind of stunned by first of all, the statistic that 500 people a year in India are killed by elephants. They are not, these are not situations where the elephants are stalking people and killing them with intent. Obviously, elephants are vegetarians. They're not interested in eating people. And they're rare, every now and then they are angry enough to pull somebody apart. But for the most part, what's going on is that the same places in India that have a lot of elephants, they kind of move across the country in this called the elephant corridor, and they kind of migrate west across the north of India. And because there's so much development up there, military bases being built, refugee settlements, just a lot going on, roads being built, the elephants get kind of stuck. They're not able to, move along the path that they normally take, and they end up, we call them pocketed elephants. And I love the idea of an elephant in a pocket. But they start running out of food. I mean, they travel in fairly large herds, family groupings, and they eat a lot because they're huge and they're vegetarian. They got to take in a lot of material to get enough nutrients. So they tend to see a farmer's field or a village will have a pretty big field of crops, and they'll move in, and sometimes just passing through and stepping on everything is damaging enough, but they'll often stop and eat, and that can just destroy a community's livelihood. So people get really upset. It's usually after dark. The elephants come through, people run out screaming. Sometimes they've been drinking and they feel like they can take on 18 elephants, and that's a mistake. But they come out with firecrackers and with torches, and they run out. And when when an elephant herd breaks apart, they get very uncomfortable. They're comfortable in their family grouping together, but if you split them up and you isolate one or two of them, they panic. They may stampede. They may just be running around feeling threatened, and when you have people out in the field and elephants in the field after dark, and everyone's running around in different directions and people are yelling and lighting off firecrackers, and the elephants are freaked out, then people get trampled. So they're mostly tramplings, and
with the occasional angry dismemberment.
Yes, the occasional angry dismemberment. And elephants used to be used by where was it, in Sri Lanka? I think it was, the elephant would be employed sometimes as an execution attendant or assistant. They would because they kind of use their trunk, and the way they eat is they sort of pull their. We don't need to go into this.
No, I mean, we already covered tiger penises. I don't think there's anybody who's left on the call who's
I mean, the creativity employed by the elephant keepers, or the whoever it was that was administering justice, and realizing that the elephant could be employed in this way. But anyway, elephants tend to, they'll take a sapling, put their trunk around it, and pull off the smaller branches. So they wrap it around, so they're holding it down and then pulling. So yes, that is if you do that with a person and not a tree,
not a good way to go.
It's not a good way to go. No. So yeah, that was, so they're not brutes. They're in a situation where they can't migrate the way they used to, and food is an issue. And and not to say that the villagers are, I mean, of course, if you're going to lose your entire year's livelihood, your crops, you're going to be upset. But the researcher I traveled with, he does elephant awareness groups. The term awareness group has a slightly different connotation there. It's more just an educational gathering to sort of tell people what not to do, and how to safely deal with a group of elephants that's coming into your village, and also setting up elephant response teams. People in these areas have elephant response teams, and they text them and say, we've got elephants coming in, from the Southwest, that we're predicting they're going to be here at such and such time. And the elephant response team will head out in its vehicle. And I didn't get to go out in the elephant response team vehicle, which haunts me to this day. I really pestered them. I'm like, it'll be fine. Oh, it's very dangerous. Oh, but we're in a car. It's very dangerous. They shut me down, Josh. Yeah. Well, anyway, yeah.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, the people in the response teams, they know to try to herd the elephants in a group so they don't panic, spread apart, get defensive, and kill people.
The truth is, in just about every story in this book, like, the brutish creatures are us. And I wonder if you could, I'll throw out three terms that I learned in this book that, like, if there's any you want to elaborate on for this audience. First is albatross clubbing. The second is crow bombing, and the third is tree blasting. Is it, like, help this group understand what albatross clubbing is?
Okay, well, sadly, it's not a nightclub populated by birds and people at the same time with loud music. And if it were, the loud music would not bother the albatross. Albatross club. Well, clubbing was just one of many, many ways that the U.S. Navy tried to persuade albatrosses to leave Midway Island. Midway Island was a strategic property of the U.S. military because it's halfway between Asia and here being, I'm in California. So they built a base there thinking, well, as soon as these big, huge planes start taking off and landing, the birds will go away, because there were a lot of seabirds colonies of nesting seabirds, and they're young. And so the bird albatross, the albatross is a largely unflappable bird. It really is. They tried rifles, bazookas, mortars, mostly firing them off, not at the birds, but just trying to scare them. They burned tires to make noxious fumes. They tried physically moving the eggs to another island and hatching them somewhere else, which didn't work. They tried taking the birds and flying them to an island, 1,000 miles away. The birds came right back. They tried tripping them by stringing wires up across the nesting area. They tried, they finally brought in zoologists. Anyway, clubbing was the one really awful thing that, I mean, among several, which is pretty much what it sounds like. It was cheaper to just have a bunch of enlisted men go out with clubs and kill them. And the albatross would just sit on the nest and kind of wait to be clubbed. They're not, they're either not so smart or kind of too chill. But anyway, and this was being done because the albatross, as we know, is a very large bird. So if you have a bird strike with a plane, a large bird in a plane, the concern was that the plane would crash. And there were bird strikes. No lives were ever lost, except for many, many, many tens of thousands of albatross. But that's albatross, the albatross story. And in the end, today, the albatross are still there. It's a wildlife sanctuary. The Navy is gone. So the albatross won the Second Battle of Midway Island, as it was called in a very delightfully dorky film strip from that era.
I mean, is that one of the lessons of this book, that like actually in the end, it's like nature often wins?
Sure. Yeah, exactly. You did kind of wonder. Well, I mean, it was the other lesson here is try to educate yourself a little bit about the animals in the area before you go in and build a road or a base, because with the elephants, with the albatross, and also in this country, when highways are put in and nobody looks at whether or not there's a species that, say, migrates from lower elevations to higher or vice versa to get food different times of the year, and you put a highway right in the middle of their path. So now, fast forward, there's going to be enough people realizing that and being angry and protesting that you're going to have to build an overpass, which is a very expensive undertaking. And so, yeah, the best thing to do is to just have some cognizance early on, and that should be part of the environmental impact report. Should include, what wildlife is here and what kind of conflicts are we going to create with people with these animals. So, because once the infrastructure is in and once the humans have moved in, you're not going to convince the animals to behave otherwise. You can try to, there's things you can try to do, like try to sterilize animals or put them on birth control, but that's a really difficult thing because it's hard enough to get humans to remember to take a pill every day. Well, I guess you don't have to do that anymore, but this is a free-ranging population, so an oral contraceptive doesn't make sense. How would you make sure that each one is getting the right amount? How do you make sure other species aren't eating that bait that has the contraceptive? And if it's an immunocontraceptive vaccine, then all of them up till now require a booster. So you'd have to somehow round up this population, make a mark on them somehow that they've had the first one. Half of them, you're never going to see them again. So it's really, when people say things like, why can't you just do birth control? It's like, well, you got 20 minutes. I'll explain to you why that's not very easy. So it's much easier to just try to think about things before you build and before you plan or before you put in fruit trees. If you don't like squirrels and roof rats, just think about it beforehand. So yeah, that is a takeaway. Yeah.
So one of many fascinating chapters in this book is about the future of pest control and efforts to, we talk about concern with unintended consequences, like efforts to alter the genomes of animals that we really would rather not have around. And I wonder if you could just share a little bit about that with everybody.
Yeah. The extreme form of birth control is something called a gene drive. And what this is, you take you make a genetic modification, which would, in the case of birth control, is often something like this. In these animals, they will only give birth to males. So that's going to pretty quickly put a stop to that population, because no more females are being born, no more babies are going to be born. So you can make this kind of modification, and this is not something being done now, I should say right away, but it's being looked into, and specifically for instances where it's a remote island where the wildlife, it's often mice or rats that have come off of ships, and so the mice and rats are devastating certain populations of seabirds, and rather than drop poison like a hail of 1080 or some other poison onto the land, which has environmental impacts, there's thinking around eliminating the rodents on that isolated island via genetic modification. The gene drive part, that's a way to, that's a manipulation that would make sure that instead of this genetic change happening in half the population, it would happen in all of them. And in order to make a gene drive work, you first have to kind of flood the area with the manipulated creatures that you have created. So in the beginning, you're going to kind of make the problem worse, because you've got to sort of swamp the population. So your gene drive creatures, there's more of them than the non-gene drive creatures. So most likely it would be done by initially poisoning, and then this would be sort of a mop up the last ones and prevent anything from happening in the future. So it's what scares me about, or what makes me uncomfortable about it, is that the work it's being done by the USDA. The National Wildlife Research Center is the research arm of the USDA. And while right now everybody's talking about it as invasive species control, my sense is that ultimately agricultural pests would be the focus. And if you look on lists of pests in this country, the USDA and the Health and Human Services people, I mean, it's bobcats, chipmunks, cormorants, swans. I mean, it's not just rodents, moles, voles, and rats. It's a pretty extensive list. And so if you let agriculture's bottom line be the determining factor in which species we're going to put a stop to, I mean, that's not something I'm comfortable with.
I imagine that you have like pretty much the coolest Rolodex of business cards that you have collected over all of your years of reporting, of just people with outrageously wonderful job titles.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about a falling safety advisor and what a professional falling safety advisor does.
Yeah, I like that one. I also have a falling supervisor. Okay. So in Canada, lumberjacks, loggers, they're known as fallers because they fall trees. They're called fallers. And I spent some time with some fallers who work specifically on danger trees. Danger trees are trees that are huge and very old. Obviously, they're like Douglas firs, the massive conifers that people that grow in these protected they call them legacy trees, kind of like the redwoods and muir woods here in California. So people pay money to go drive through them and hike through them. They're very old, very huge, and that's makes some people nervous because old trees start to drop limbs. They may be rotting inside. They die very slowly. They may be dying for 100 or 200 years where they're slowly rotting inside. It's hard to tell from the outside. So that means you have to hire somebody called a danger tree assessor. I also have that business card, the danger tree assessor. So if the danger tree assessor determines that this massive old mossy Douglas fir needs to be dealt with because it may fall onto a hiking path, say, or a parking lot and kill people, which has happened, then you bring in the fallers, and the danger tree faller is a very specific kind of faller. It's someone who they climb up like 2/3 of the way up these massive trees. They climb up, they drill holes, they put dynamite in, and they come back down, go several hundred yards away and blow off the top of the tree. So now it weighs less, there's less sway in the wind, it's more stable. So you're buying another couple of decades where this tree can be standing, and you wouldn't see that the top is missing. So anybody walking through will just think, look, there's another beautiful moss-covered Douglas fir. And so to do it safely is tricky. And there's falling safety supervisor is the person who's there to make sure everything's being done safely. That is a falling safety supervisor. And so you had your faller blaster, your faller supervisor, and your falling safety supervisor. We're all there that day. Yeah.
The bee watchers from Hotch Hotch. I think there's a Dr. Seuss story about that.
Yeah.
Is it too early to ask what the next adventure you're gonna go on is?
Yeah, only in
subject?
that I have not even sold that book yet. Don't know if I will. My agent has the proposal, and I think that I'm going to do that, but I'm not out with it yet.
Okay.
So, but it is a book. It is nonfiction.
Okay. Yeah. and how enticing. Can I make a plea to you?
Sure.
That I want you to write a book that is just Mary Roach footnotes. Just a book of footnotes.
Just a book of footnotes. I would love to do that. I would love to do that. Yeah, because I think there are people who only read the footnotes. I think my agent only reads the footnotes.
Do you happen to have a favorite footnote in this book?
I do, but without reading it aloud, and I don't have the book right here.
Oh, okay.
I was scrambling this morning.
Being chased by a bear. Yeah.
Literally, the sweater was on back. My husband, as I was running down the stairs, goes, "Your sweater's on backwards, inside out." The tag was here. So what'd you just ask me?
Favorite footnote.
Oh, the footnote. Okay. I really did enjoy the Prestige Brands footnote. See, this was a footnote where, oh God, how did I even get into it? Okay. It had to do with, there's a poison that's what's the wart remedy? There's a wart remedy that is the same name as a poison. And I was like, does the wart company, do they know that, what is the number for the, anyway, there's a wart removing product that has the same name as a deadly poison and code name. And it's made by Prestige Brands. And I tried to contact them to just say, hey, did you do this intentionally? Do you realize that you've named your product after this incredibly lethal poison? And they never wrote back. And they, when people do that, I'm like, come on, like really? And then so in looking up Prestige Brands, in addition to the wart remover, here are some Prestige brands. There's a lice product. There's Beano, the fart remedy. There's Boudreaux's butt paste. There's like every disgusting affliction that we humans have. Prestige Brands has a product. And I'm like, you called yourself Prestige Brands. In what way is Boudreaux's butt paste a Prestige brand? Anyway, the list is far longer than what I've just recalled off the top of my head. Like every gross human thing that you want to have remedied, Prestige Brands has a product for you. Anyway, so I don't know if the Prestige Brand people will ever see that footnote, but I do hope so, because they were very unhelpful.
Well, I mean, it's one of the things I love about your writing is that you always like ask the next question. Like you could leave it right there, or you could reach out to the Prestige Brands whatever,
Exactly. It was like, but in Gulp, I had a chat. Gulp came out, I don't know, it was 7 years ago, I'm not sure. But it was around the time when fecal transplants were just starting to be something people knew about. And they were being done not with a series of pills, but with shit in a blender. And the blender that was used in this, where it was the whole process was developed, it was an Oster blender. And I thought, I wonder if the Oster people know that they are the go-to blender for fecal transplants. They put the material in there with distilled water and press frap or puree or whatever. And I'm like, and the guy's like, the researcher's like, yeah, it's a good blender. And so I called.
What more endorsements does a company need?
Yes, exactly. So their response was classic, and that is a footnote. Yeah.
So with our last couple minutes, I want to ask you, like, how has this changed? How has the research of this book changed how you relate to the natural world?
Yeah, I think it's changed the way I think about the animals that we tend to call pests. And I don't like the word pest because it reduces these creatures to the human context rather than thinking of them as animals like any other animal. And some of them, like rodents, are very intelligent. And it gives us permission to just call somebody and make them go away, and often not in a nice way. And so I'm definitely more of I'm an annoying person to be around. If you have rodents in your world, I'm like, no, do not get glue traps. I'll never speak to you again if you get a glue trap. And there are people that you can call who are humane wildlife control operators. They know how to, practice exclusion. They can, keep your house, plug up the holes where the animals are getting in. They can take a look. There's just better ways to go about things. So I'm kind of an advocate for the little guys that nobody advocates for. The cougars and the wolves and the coyotes and the bears, there will always be people speaking up for them because they're big and magnificent and beautiful, and people feel very emotional towards them. But with the things that we call pests, people feel very emotional against them. And so I guess I became a little bit more of an advocate for those creatures.
Well, we are no longer using glue traps in my house.
Okay.
That was very convincing, and
Okay,
I
good.
guess it hadn't quite dawned on me. We never caught one anyway, so I guess it doesn't matter. But we do have a question from the audience that I want to get to you before we let you go. And the question is, which research area should citizen scientists explore next?
Which research areas should citizen scientists in terms of human wildlife conflict? Or
I don't know, actually, what we're asking here.
I don't really have the answer to that. I don't know. Wherever your passion is, I think there's probably an opportunity. I don't know.
Let me give you another question from the audience. One last one. All right. Since finishing Fuzz, do you have any updates on communities achieving some success in coexisting with wildlife? What's going on in Aspen?
I don't know. I don't know what's going on in Aspen since the book came out. There are the community. There's a community I mentioned in the book that Snowmass, which is another ski and mountain bike resort, where the people who deal with the human bear conflicts are very dedicated and are just kind of taking things a step further, and it's made a huge difference. Almost no bears have been destroyed there because they're doing things like, it's one thing to say, okay, we've got legislation saying that everybody has to secure their compost and trash in bear resistant containers, but you have to enforce that. You have to give people fines. You have to make sure everybody's aware of it. So she'll do things. These two women in Snowmass, they will get into the dumpster. They will open a garbage bag and look at the mail and see whose trash this is, and figure out who gets the fine, and go and talk to them, and also just trying to explain to people, this is why we're doing it, because this is what happens when bears and people are close together in close contact. The bears get bolder and bolder, and eventually somebody's got a dog. The bear comes into the house. The dog gets excited. The person intervenes. Now the person's dead. So the end point is either going to be a dead person or a dead bear, and far more often it's a dead bear. So she explains, and she's gone into restaurants. There's a lot of restaurants because it's a resort area, and done slide presentations in English and in Spanish. So the whole staff, including the kitchen workers, because they're the ones taking out the trash, they don't know that there's a law to use this double lock system, and they're in a hurry, and they don't care because they don't know, and the restaurant owner hasn't bothered to tell them. And so, she's thinking through these two women, they think through all of what is going on, where are things breaking down, how can we help prevent this, and how can we make sure that these containers are used properly. So that's been a real success in areas where where these laws are enforced and where people actually do keep bear attractants away from bears. The results are quite impressive. And there's also the other thing that I would mention is that's hopeful is that there are a number of organizations that are promoting coexistence, and this is with large carnivores like wolves, and particularly wolves right now. And they so just bringing together with facilitators who know kind of how to facilitate conversations between people who have very opposing views. So bringing in ranchers and hunters and environmental activists and animal welfare people for 2 or 3 days to sit down and not just talk, but listen and try to understand each other's perspective and come up with solutions and maybe legislation. And so that's hopeful, that emphasis on coexistence. So it's all down to changing human behavior, because as you pointed out earlier, it's really hard to change the behavior of animals. You can try things like hazing or translocation, and I don't want to go, that's in the book, the reasons why that's not terribly effective or not for very long. So the answer is always try to get humans to behave differently. And so there's some hopeful news. Yeah.
Well, Mary, thank you so much for spending this time with us on a Sunday morning. Thank you so much for writing this book. And I just want to make one more plug for it, because I promise you will, after reading this book, have so many just fun stories, anecdotes, facts, statistics, footnotes to share with everybody around you that I'm going to be feeding on this for a while. So thank you for writing it.
Oh, well, it was my pleasure. And let me just say that people probably know you through Atlas Obscura, if that may be how they're familiar with you. But let me also say that Moonwalking with Einstein is just an amazing book that people should read, in which Josh becomes it was the U.S. memory champion.
U.S. memory champion, a long time ago. Yeah.
Yeah. So not only does it give you practical steps, which I still use to try to remember things, but it's just an amazing journey and just a wonderfully witty and fun book. So
thank you, Mary.
If you don't feel like buying Fuzz, then buy Moonwalking with Einstein.
Or buy them both, 2 for 1.
Yeah, or Gastro Obscura.
That's right, which I should have in front of me, but I don't. Yeah.
It's upstairs in the bathroom, actually. It's so good. It's amazing.
Read about food in the bathroom. Yeah.
The entries are just kind of the right length.
That's what it's for. Yeah.
Yeah, but anyway, well, my footnotes are good for the bathroom too. But anyway, it's amazing. I love.
Thank you, Mary.
You guys did such a great job on that. It's not just here's some weird stuff to eat. It is, stories like the mandatory commissaries in communist China, just stories and people and all of it making you want to just get back out into the world and travel and eat and all those things that we haven't been able to do. But thank you so much, and I thank you everybody. I'm going a little bit over because also I was 10 minutes late, so I want to just apologize again. It was Sunday morning, and it's like Sunday morning. I'm gonna lie in bed for a while longer.
It was worth waiting for. So
oh shit!
Thanks for making it.
Well,
thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mary. Thank you, Josh. Questions were absolutely perfect. And Mary, it was wonderful to hear all of your answers. I want to thank our partners at the Wisconsin Science Festival for all of the events that they've hosted as well over the last 4 days across Wisconsin. Everyone showing up today. We had more than 200 people, 31 different communities across Wisconsin, from Washburn in the north to Racine in the south and Appleton in the east to Eau Claire in the west. We also had 20 states represented today, 4 countries, 3 continents. So thank you for joining us to listen to Josh and Mary talk about Fuzz. do buy Moonwalking with Einstein, do buy Fuzz. That brings the 2021 Wisconsin Book Festival Fall Celebration to a close. We do have about 10 more standalone events throughout the fall, so visit wisconsinbookfestival.org to find out about all of those. And have a great rest of your Sunday. Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.